Right, good evening, everyone. Welcome to the Lougheed College Lectures. And thank you so much for joining us. My name is Lois Harder, and I have the distinct privilege of being the principal of the Peter Lougheed Leadership College, as well as a professor here at the University of Alberta in political science. So as we begin, I would like to respectfully acknowledge that we are situated on Treaty 6 territory, traditional lands of First Nations and Métis people. Reconciliation should be a central concern of 21st century leaders, and territorial acknowledgement is one small gesture in that important project. I would also like to thank our sponsor, Syncrude, for supporting these lectures and by extension leadership development here at the University of Alberta. The Peter Lougheed Leadership College was established in 2015 with the help of several generous donors and the support of the Lougheed family. Peter Lougheed was himself a talented young leader in his university days, a member of the Golden Bears football team, president of Delta Epsilon fraternity, and the president of the Students' Union. He would go on to study law and gain an MBA from Harvard, play football professionally in Edmonton, and, of course, to a storied career as Alberta's first progressive conservative premier, a post he held from 1971 to 1985. Regardless of one's political alignment, we should all be able to agree that Peter Lougheed's dedication to publicly spirited leadership was unassailable. That dedication certainly inspires the work of the PLLC. The college is an interdisciplinary center for leadership education. We aim to equip people with knowledge and skills that will enable them to engage with diverse people and ideas and build their leadership capacity. Our programming includes courses and a certificate program for undergraduate students, teaching and leadership development workshops for graduate students and postdoctoral fellows, and leadership development collaborations within the university and with various community, business, and government partners. We have a dynamic mentorship program, and all of our undergraduate students engage in community service through something we call a stretch experience. We also host this inspiring Lougheed College Lectures series, and this year it is organized around the theme of what comes next for Alberta. With a new provincial government and an upcoming federal election, intensifying pressure to address climate change and diversify Alberta's economy, a moral obligation to take up the TRC's calls to action, and a series of transformations, technological, generational, organizational, the series invites people to grapple with pressing issues and debates. We hope it will challenge your thinking and motivate you to make positive change in your community. So a couple of bits of business before we get to the matter at hand. First of all, we thank everyone who made a contribution to the campus food bank this evening. If you did not bring a non-perishable food item, we invite you to donate online. During the address tonight, we ask that you do not take any audio or video recording. This lecture will be recorded and available to the public on our website. And our next lecture will happen Thursday, November 14th from 6:30 to 8 o'clock in CSIS 1440. CSIS is the Centennial Center for Interdisciplinary Science on the other side of campus. Our topic is digital leadership, and it features Alex Benet, who's the former Chief Information Officer with the Government of Canada, Roger Oldham, who is the Chief Digital Officer for the UK Ministry of Justice, and Dominique Bone, who is the Chief Officer for the Digital Innovation Office at the Government of Alberta. Now, for the reason you are all here. Tonight, we are thrilled to have Robert Saik with us to discuss Food 5.0, How We Feed the Future. In advance of the Thanksgiving weekend, it seemed appropriate to turn our minds to the harvest. Robert will speak for about 45 minutes, followed by an opportunity for Q&A. Robert is a distinguished agrologist, entrepreneur, and international consultant who has worked with a wide variety of agriculturalists, from Nigeria's Minister of Agriculture to Bill Gates. We might not think of Bill Gates as an agriculturalist, but I gather that he is, as we will learn about contemporary agriculture. Robert's first book, The Agricultural Manifesto, 10 Key Drivers That Will Shape Agriculture in the Next Decade, was a 2014 Best of Amazon book, and his TEDx talk, Will Agriculture Be Allowed to Feed 9 Billion People, has been viewed over 150,000 times. His latest book, with the same title as tonight's talk, is Food 5.0, How We Feed the Future. It takes the reader on a journey from the muscle era of farming to a future where the convergence of new technologies, including sensors, robotics, and machine learning, make it possible to feed 10 billion people sustainably. The book is for sale in the lobby after the talk. So thank you so much for joining us, Robert. I'm sure your insights tonight will make their way into my Thanksgiving dinner conversation.
Mic check. Thank you very much. Thank you. Yvette, thank you. And thanks to Jill out there manning the book sales. Delightful to be here. My dean, not at the time I graduated, but it's good to have the Dean of Agriculture with us. And I'm going to take you on a journey. It's going to be a lot of fun. If I could queue up, guys, Angus and Larry. Oh, okay. Well, I'm wearing purple because the motif is purple. I didn't know that. And I also heard today that Mental Health Day is the color purple. Is that correct? We're trying to debate that, so that's kind of cool. I just kind of fell into that. And we need a lot of mental health support right now because I just left Olds this morning, and we have about 6 to 8 inches of snow on the crop, and 50% of the crop's still out, and we're near halfway through the month of October. So I don't know how these guys are going to get the crop off. You have to melt the snow, have to dry the grain, have to take the grain off. So we have a long way to go. So this Thanksgiving, as you're thinking about people, think about the farmers out there. We'll touch on that. I bet you woke up this morning and you did not think about plague. You woke up this morning, you did not think about war. And you woke up this morning and you didn't think about starvation. None of us really woke up this morning thinking about that. Yet just 100 years ago, World War I claimed over 15 million people. The estimates are 15 to 30, depending on how you count human loss. Spanish flu in 1919 cleared out 50 million, probably on the low side, million people. There was no graduating class at Olds College in 1919 because they shut the college down that year because so many people were sick. They couldn't bring them together. And famine killed an estimated 2 million people. The Persian famine was really big, and that's just right ahead of the Ukrainian Holods that happened. And this was just 100 years ago. Just 100 years ago. It's not that long ago. This was the world, and people woke up every day. And we live in remarkable times today. But mass media has us believing that we live in terrible times. But the numbers don't stack up. This is disease. We've virtually eradicated most communicable diseases on the planet. And there are many people out now predicting that by 2032, 2033, we'll eradicate all diseases on the planet. So diseases aren't really getting worse. War, while there's lots of news about war on TV and strife, the fact is that we live in the most you could argue, the most peaceful time in human history. And the blue line represents the conflicts and casualties and deaths since 1900, the red line since 1400. This is where we live right now. So we don't wake up every day thinking about war because there just isn't that much war. And famine virtually has been eradicated. Yes, we still have about 800 million people in abject poverty, but that too is within our sights of dealing with it. So why is the world so much better? And I argue that the world is so much better because of two reasons. One is science and agriculture, especially science in agriculture. And I'm thankful to be alive in this era. You couldn't be alive in a better time in human history than right now, in spite of what people are saying this is a great time to be alive. So who am I? Well, first of all, this is my favorite go to Whole Foods t-shirt. I like wearing this to Organic Planet and places like that. So I'm standing right in front of the Human Longevity Institute, which was founded by Dr. Craig Ventnor, was the first person to sequence the human genome. And so if you really want to know who I am, this is my genome. So this is the 22 chromosomes that make up the majority of the human body. If you want to know who I am, that's who I am. Or where do I come from? Well, again, how far back you want to go. So this is my dad last 10,000 years in my dad's side, the genomic complex, and where he came from ancestrally. And this is where my mom would have come from. And the last 2,000 years or so, this is kind of where I come from. Kind of round-faced, blue eyes. Used to have light-colored, now silver-colored hair. Ukrainian descent, Baltic, Caucasian, or Olds, Alberta. Just a little bit. Depends on frame of reference, right? It just depends on frame of reference. If you want to go deeper, we can go deeper. This is these are the individual chromosomes and the genes that make up. And yes, Dan, I do have genetic deficiencies or defects, yeah. So, but it gets deeper. I'm actually prone, perhaps, to some cancers from my mom's side, primarily breast cancer from my mom's side, which could lead to prostate cancer in men. But I show all this with you because people are fascinated by this. They're fascinated to see this. And yet when you talk about the same science, the exact same science for agriculture, all of this is vilified. Isn't this fantastic? But if we talk about agriculture, all of this is vilified. And that dog don't hunt for me. It don't make sense. So my background is plant physiology, soil chemistry, and crop nutrition. I've been involved in lots of ventures. I have cattle in Saskatchewan. I have a farm that I'm partners with in Uganda. We have 5,300 acres north of Kampala to Gulu and then west towards the Congo. I've been an entrepreneur all my life. I've started lots and lots of different businesses. But at the heart of it, it's always getting back to the same thing. How do we employ the resources that we have? How do we take scarce resources and allocate them to maximize food production in a safe, reliable manner that brings affordable food to you? How do we do that? So I've had a very interesting career, built data companies, built consulting firms called AgriTrend, sold them. Now I'm working on autonomous agriculture with DOT. I've just launched a company, AGvisorPRO, which is the Uberization, I'll show you that, of knowledge and wisdom. And you heard about the 2 books that I've written. So this is kind of where I come from. But I want to give credit where credit is due to 3 key individuals. Jerry Stoller would be another one that's a mentor of mine. But Dan Sullivan, I go every 90 days to Toronto to a course called Strategic Coach. And I just started my 26th year. So that's over 100 flights to Toronto. Yes, I know there's a carbon footprint. But when I go there, I work on my business and my life with Dan Sullivan. Peter Diamandis is founder of the X Prize Foundation, Singularity University, and Abundance 360. And then the one on the far right is Hans Rosling, and he passed away. But Hans is the author of one of the best books ever called Factfulness. And you should buy this book because this book talks about the world as it is, not how you think it is. The world as it is. There are 13 questions at the beginning of the book, and most people fail the exam. Hans Rosling's book, Factfulness, is one of the most interesting books because it looks at long-term demographics and it looks at long-term statistical data from people like WHO and UN, etc. I was born in 1960. This is the world as it was in 1960. These are the people who died before the age of 50. China and India are 2 of the big dots there. These are the number of people expected to live above 70 in 1960. In other words, very few people actually made it to 70 years old. This is the world as it is in 2018. These are the people who are dead before 50. These are the people who extend their lives beyond 70. Notice China and India have moved up and the populations have grown. So for the millennials in the room, we hear a lot of talk about the good old days. You have a choice now. 1960, takers, or 2018. I take where we live now. It's a much better world, but we're not taught that. We're not framed with that. We're framed that the world's getting worse. Now, we have a challenge in the next 30 years between 2020 and 2050 to feed a population that arguably would be somewhere around 9.6 or 10 billion people. And the question is, can we do it? Well, we've done it before. You see the trajectory of population increase, and the solid line represents that population increase, and we fed the people. But now we have a challenge, because between now and 2050, we've got to feed this growing population. In the next 30 years, we've got to increase our food production. And the question is, can we? Now, we did it before, but before, society wasn't hell-bent on taking all the tools away from farmers. Now, we have everybody on social media who thinks they understand farming. And they're going to take all the tools away. So the question I have is not, can we feed 9 or 10 billion people? The question is, will we be allowed to? And when it comes to a large population, a scientist I was interviewing in Argentina once put it very well. She said, when it comes to population growth, we have 3 choices. We can kill people, and we've got a really good track record of doing that. She said, we can implement mandatory birth control. Not a great record of doing that, and who decides to play God? And the third thing we can do is we can feed people. There's your choices. So 1, 2, or 3. Kill people, mandatory birth control, or feed them. There are your choices. There's no other choice. There are the choices, period. Now, you have lots of people thinking that humans are a plague on the planet. Anti-humanism is a real thing. So killing people would be a way to do that. Then we all return back to nature, but we're not here to enjoy it. So it's really interesting. In the next 30 years, we've got to grow 10,000 years worth of food in the next 30 years. This is what we have to do. We have to increase food production everywhere on the planet, 60 to 70%. That is the increase in food production in India, in Pakistan, in Uganda, in Argentina, in Nigeria. But when it comes to Argentina and Australia and Canada, we've got to do way more than this, because there are only about 5 or 6 exporting regions in the world that actually export more food than they grow. We happen to be blessed to live in one of those regions. So the pressure on us is way higher than that. And we must ensure agriculture, so long as there's human beings, we have to ensure that agriculture is infinitely sustainable. Would you agree? We'll be tested like never before. Can we do it? If we leverage the tools. Now, there's a problem, because there's a dangerous disconnect going on between consumers and agriculture. This is the Canadian Centre for Food Integrity, and they say that the trust in agriculture is dropping off. The trust in farmers is dropping off, particularly amongst millennials. And so the book I wrote, Food 5.0, was designed to foster conversation about modern agriculture and what it means to grow food today, really, by talking to farmers and sharing that with you. Now, when it comes to agriculture, we've got an enormous image problem. If I say the word farm to most city people and they think about a red-fendered pickup truck, a little red barn, or farmers in bib overalls, we've got a problem. Can we just get rid of the red barn, please? This is in my book. They're called Rob's Rants. They got a little soapbox there, so we just carved them out. If you hear the word farm and think of a red barn, round-fendered pickup truck, or a ruddy-faced guy or gal wearing bib overalls and a straw hat, you're watching the History Channel. Today's agriculture is not your grandpa's farm. Chances are your brain is so disconnected from modern agriculture, it's not even funny. Not even funny. Farmers of consequence, they say 2% of North Americans actually grow food are farmers. Really? 370 million people in Canada, the United States, times 2% is equal to 7.4 million farmers? I don't think so. Farmers of consequence, those that actually make a living by farming, are more like 0.2% of the North American population. They're the ones that grow 80% of your food. And in Canada, we could fit most of the farmers of consequence in the Rogers Centre, in a big hockey rink. And there might be seats left over. That's how few of them there are. That's how few of them there are. And this is a real challenge, because they have no voice. They have no voice. You don't know them. You don't understand them. You don't know what they're doing. You think bib overalls and a red-fendered pickup truck. Consumers are so disconnected from agriculture right now. It bothers me that many consumers are scared of food. It bothers me that unscrupulous marketers are preying on the fear of the ignorant. It bothers me that people will pay way more for the adjectives on a food label than the food in the package. I would like to have a conversation with you about agriculture, the business and science of the modern farm. It's my wish that I can engage you with my thoughts. It's my hope that after reading the book, you will look at food labels with a more critical eye and you'll call bullshit on those labels that are spreading fear to pull dollars out of your pocket. I've got lots of examples here. Thanks, Larry. So it doesn't matter. When I was growing up, we were Greek Orthodox. You had Ukrainian Catholic, you had Presbyterian, you had United Church people, you had Catholics, you had all these different religions. Today, we don't talk about religion very much. We all respect each other, but if you want to have a heated conversation, just start bringing up the concepts of paleo and veganism and vegetarianism and meatitarianism and whether you're agroecological or regenerative or conventional or organic and all of this stuff. And can we all just stop and agree that agriculture must be infinitely sustainable? Could we agree on that? So long as we have people? And what would make agriculture infinitely sustainable? Do you ever think about that? Really deeply think about what would make agriculture infinitely sustainable? So I want to take you through 5 years of agriculture, where we came from and where we're going, the muscle, machine, chemistry, biotech, and convergence eras. The era of muscle was a brutal era, and everybody was involved in growing food. You had to, because the energy conversion was so low. Horses, oxen, women and men pulling plows. I'm always amused that when I come across ideologically driven people professing that we should somehow go back to a simpler agriculture where you are one with the land and you work the soil with your bare hands, I know two things. That kind of agriculture will not feed a population of 2050, and I know they've never harvested half an acre of potatoes by hand, ever. I know those two things, right? Then we move into the age of machines. So we replaced the horse and started going with tractors. We're still living in the age of machines. Now notice the two pictures are both about plowing. They're working the soil. They're plowing the soil. It's destructive to the soil. So the era of chemistry came along, and that really was, the big change was the Haber-Bosch process. With every breath you take, every move you make, there's 78%, should be a song, 78% nitrogen you breathe in, and Haber-Bosch took that nitrogen, inert nitrogen, and fixed it into fertilizer. Arguably the most important invention in human history, because 50% of the protein of every man, woman, and child on this planet owes itself to fertilizer. Most people don't think about it. This was the era of 2,4-D and atrazine, trifluralin. This is the era of chemistry. It allowed farmers to grow a crop and actually spray the weeds out. It allowed farmers to grow a crop and keep the insects out. It was the era of chemistry. We still live in that era. But the chemistry we're using today is grams per acre, not pounds of active ingredient, but grams of active ingredient per acre. You realize that when you stare at this, it's water, right? You realize that. City people, you realize that? It's water. We're taking a pop can of a product like Roundup, and we're spraying that pop can on the football field. You can't do it with a pop can. So we carry any between 5 and 20 gallons of water. So when you see a sprayer working, it's pushing out water, not dousing the crop in chemicals. That don't make no sense. My hackles rise, whatever hackles are, when I hear farmers say that farmers douse their crops with chemicals or slaughter the land with fertilizer. Their comments make no sense because chemicals, fertilizer are expensive. Farmers operate on razor-thin margins, and consequently, the judicious use and application of nutrients and products is very important. Why would we waste our resources? It makes no sense. And you say, oh, well, in Europe, they do it way differently. Yep, in Europe, they do. They use one hell of a lot more chemistry than we do on a per hectare basis. This map shows you the active ingredient load per acre or per hectare on the land. Canada's got about a 1 kilogram per hectare active ingredient load. United States about 2.2. Our friends in Netherlands is 8.8. In Italy, it is about, 8.9. Don't tell me that we're using more chemistry with our agriculture, because we are using far less than the Europeans do. So don't tell me that they got the answers, because the stats don't wash. Stats don't wash. Now, you got all kinds of labeling going on. You got these blueberries. These are pesticide-free blueberries. Well, the damn well should be. They're wild. But you'll buy them because they're pesticide-free, right? What are we testing for? Are you testing for both organic and synthetic pesticides? Are you? Or are you testing for stuff that will really hurt you, like aflatoxin, mycotoxin, E. coli, salmonella? That stuff will hurt you, right? And do you understand what the difference between a parts per million and a part per billion is? Part per million is 1 second in 11 days. A part per billion is 1 second in 32 years. And you hear this stuff about, oh my God, there's 100 parts per billion in that product, you freak out. It's like 11 seconds in 32 years, or 100 seconds in 32 years. And then for good measure on these wild blueberries that are pesticide-free, we'll slap on an OGMO sticker on there, make you feel better, because of course, all wild blueberries grown in the wild without pesticides are all genetically engineered. And you buy that, pay another $1.29 a bag, because of the adjectives, right? Nothing is being assaulted worse than Roundup right now, or glyphosate. Nothing is being assaulted worse right now. Murder of a molecule, 1 in 100-year chemistry, one of the most innocuous and safe products you can ever use. And you watch all these memes go on in the media about people spraying their grass with Roundup. And the interesting thing is the EPA is starting to push back and say California can't call it a carcinogen anymore because it's not. Why would you spray Roundup on your lawn? It doesn't make any sense. It would kill the lawn. And yet you got all these memes out there of people spraying Roundup on the lawn. That don't make no sense. Now, let's talk about organic pesticides. What the hell? Yeah, organic pesticides. First one being Bacillus thuringiensis. It's a bacterial side. It's used to kill bugs in crops. They spray it to kill Lepidoptera, or bugs like worms and caterpillars and stuff that attack the crops. It's an organic insecticide, Bacillus thuringiensis. It's an organic insecticide. They use it all the time. What about Bordeaux mixture? The picture of the apple tree is blue. Bordeaux mixture is a mixture of copper sulfate and limestone. They spray it on crops to try to keep the bugs and the molds off of vines, vineyards and stuff. Interesting history, it really started by spraying the vineyards in France next to the roadways with copper sulfate and lime to keep the people from eating the grapes on their way to Paris. So they were just munching away, so they sprayed it. And then they found out that it controlled things like botrytis. And today, it's the #1 organically used pesticide in organic wine production. You're going, I didn't know anything about that. And the real kicker is pyrethrin. Pyrethrin is made from chrysanthemum. So they crush up chrysanthemum and they get out pyrethrum. Pyrethrum is the same as pyrethroid. Pyrethroid is a synthetic insecticide. Pyrethrin is the organic insecticide. And you're allowed to spray that on your organic crops. The kicker is pyrethrin, organic, has 6 esters, whereas pyrethroid only has 2. So the synthetic form is far less dangerous to things like birds and butterflies and bees and human beings. And the organic form is paradoxically more dangerous. But you can use this all the time. So when you read a label for organic, it always says, grown without synthetic pesticides. That's because it's grown with organic pesticides. What do you think? They grow a crop of spinach and just put a sign up at the end of the field and say, this field is organic, insects and diseases, please stay away. And if that worked, wouldn't we all be doing it? So enter agriculture 4.0, the biotech or genetic engineering revolution. What do you see on this picture? This is a marvel. First of all, there is no tillage. The crop is seeded into the stubble of the previous crop. There is no tillage. There's no soil degradation. The field is clean. It's straight because it's sown with GPS. How is this all possible? Through genetic engineering, through GMO crops. GMO is a poor name for an amazing science and is plagued by a lot of BS. I think GMO really stands for generally misunderstood organism, because people don't have any idea about this. And I'll say this categorically. The only reason you would be against GMO is if you don't understand the science of it. Because if you surely understood the science of it, there's no way you could be against it. That's simple. But there's a lot of BS going on to pull dollars out of your pocket.
Well, this here is a collection of non-GMO bullshit. First thing we have here on the table is non-GMO organic maple pancake syrup. I didn't know they made GMO maple trees. Anyway, that's bullshit. What is this here? This is peas. Non-GMO peas. Well, that would have to mean that there's GMO peas and there ain't any. And what's this one here? Oh, this is non-GMO, I don't know, it's French, organic peppermint. Well, there ain't no GMO pepper. Oh, this one here. Just non-GMO coconut cluster. Bullshit, there ain't no GMO coconuts. What's this one here? Oh, non-GMO avocado oil. Well, bullshit, there ain't no avocado oil. This is GMO'd. And what's this one? This is non-GMO organic molasses. And non-GMO icing, well, it could be GMO icing sugar, I say. And this here is non-GMO baby banana yum-yums. Well, there ain't no GMO bananas. And this is non-GMO. This is non-GMO gluten-free figs, because figs always have gluten and GMO in them. And this one here, what's this one here? Is some kind of bites here, non-GMO bites. Ridiculously tasty. And what's this one here? Oh, this is non-GMO vegan gluten, sea snacks. This is seaweed. This is non-GMO verified seaweed. Yeah, roasted seaweed, non-GMO. Bullshit.
And you'd all paid a lot of extra money for that. So what exactly is genetic engineering? Genetic engineering is nothing more, nothing less than an advancement of the breeding process. We've been breeding crops in agriculture since man has been domesticating crops, whether it's open pollination, hybridization, mutagenesis, which is subjection to seeds to either carcinogenic chemicals or nuclear radiation. I'll repeat that, subjection of seeds to nuclear radiation or carcinogenic chemicals. A polyploid, cross species. Now, RNAi, transgenic, cisgenic, gene editing, and CRISPR is all genetic engineering. And people say, well, just label it. Well, GMO isn't an ingredient. It's a breeding process defined by all these different processes. And if you're going to breed one breeding process, shouldn't you label them all? In other words, don't you want to know if your crop was derived through nuclear radiation, gamma rays? Don't you want to know that? Well, every time you eat a grapefruit and it's red flesh, that's what you're eating. And it can be paradoxically labeled organic. Think about that. So the double food standard is the kicker. The organic industry is fine with random scrambling of thousands of chromosomes by exposing seeds in a lab to nuclear radiation or carcinogenic chemicals, but it is against the most advanced and modern breeding techniques associated with genetic engineering. Riddle me that, Batman. I don't understand. Why would they do that? Why would they do that? Why would they vilify a modern breeding technique? Doesn't make any sense to me. Horizontal gene transfer, they say it's not natural. Well, if every time you eat a sweet potato, that sweet potato has agrobacteriumism, it's the same methodology that they use to transfer some of the genetic material in GMOs. And today, or it was September 21st, but today on Twitter, 1 in 20 plants is found out to be naturally genetically modified using agrobacterium. So should you rip up all of those plants? And the big success story is actually the reduction in pesticide use due to genetic engineering. We don't spray insecticides on crops anymore because Bacillus thuringiensis, remember our organic friend, is inside corn, cotton, and soybeans, and it's dropped down the amount of insecticide that we use per acre. So we don't need to spray indiscriminate insecticides because an organic protein from Bacillus thuringiensis is inside the crop, allowing us not to spray the crop anymore with insecticides. So I don't mean to beat a dead horse, but I'll repeat this. It's the introduction of herbicide and insecticide-resistant crops that allows farmers to reduce the pesticide load on the land. And you can see that in the graph I showed you earlier in terms of active ingredient between North America and the EU. So farmers are fooled or scared by labels. Biotech will be critical for agriculture 5.0. And there's no such thing as GMO spinach, so please don't pay a premium for it because it doesn't exist. Now let's talk about convergence, where agriculture is going. Now we're going to talk about the future. Now convergence is heavily dependent upon Moore's law. Linear and exponential growth of technologies coming on, like the cell phone in your hand, in your pocket, didn't exist 11 years, and now everybody has them. It's ubiquitous. Data is growing and connectivity is happening at a rapid rate. Let's look at the world of convergence. This is a video that I got through Peter Diamandis. I'll share it with you, and then I'll bring it home to agriculture.
Entrepreneurs are hardwired to solve problems. In the early days, mankind's biggest challenge was staying alive. We discovered fire, invented tools, and worked together to stalk prey. We hunted whales to light the dark nights, ravaged mountainsides for coal, drilled to liberate oil. Our challenges and our tools have evolved. Early hominids' hammerstones are now complex autonomous machines. Technologies with unprecedented power, artificial intelligence, robotics, synthetic biology are better, faster, cheaper, and easier to use each day. And the biggest, most disruptive changes are still ahead. Our 25-year Abundance 360 journey is a countdown to technological singularity, the point at which change is so rapid that we cannot predict what happens next. Every step closer to the singularity will profoundly impact our lives, communities, industries, and the planet. We're already experiencing a fraction of this change. With services like Google and Baidu, every smartphone user has more access to information than the heads of nations did just 20 years ago. We can each spin up 1,000 processor cores on the cloud in moments, crowdfund a multi-million-dollar business with thousands of global supporters, launch an ICO to fund a Moonshot, speak and understand 100 languages through real-time translation software. And this is just with today's technology. In 2018, we will witness quantum supremacy, a demonstration of quantum computing that classical supercomputers cannot simulate. By 2020, we'll see 100 gigabit connection speeds on 5G networks. We'll take flight in autonomous aerial taxis, and an army of AI agents will facilitate your every action. A decade into our Abundance 360 journey, the first private missions will take off for Mars. On Earth, over 10 million drone flights will take place each day, as Hyperloop carries passengers faster than commercial jets. By 2028, car ownership is dead, and autonomous fleets of electric cars will chauffeur us to our destinations. Solar and wind now generate 100% of all new energy production, pricing below 1 cent per kilowatt hour. By 2032, AI will outperform human intelligence, and medical nanorobots will travel through our bloodstream, curing cancer. Finally, by 2036, we'll have connected the human cortex to the cloud, and everyday life will be nearly unrecognizable to those of us here in 2018. With change comes challenge and tremendous opportunity. How will you respond?
So how will you respond? I go to Abundance 360 every year to be immersed in the technology that's happening all around the world, try to bring that back to agriculture. I don't necessarily agree with everything in that video, but it gives you a sense of the speed. And agriculture is no exception. And I would argue that biotechnology, bioengineering, is one of our most important tools. The language of life, ATCs and Gs, genetic engineering, our ability to do gene silencing, editing, and CRISPR-Cas9 and 13 are exploding. We can raise climate-resilient crops. We can do nutrient-dense foods to make our food healthier, more nutrient-dense. Synthetic biology will yield new fertilizers, new crop protection products, new crops and new foods. And it's happening all around us every day, and billions of dollars are being poured into these sciences that are in agriculture or will touch agriculture. CRISPR gene silencing, this is all brand new data. This just happened in August. CRISPR can solve looming food crisis, and they're tackling some issues. Jointless tomatoes, fungus-resistant bananas, high-yielding corn, soybeans. This again just happened in July. This is Argentine science using gene silencing. This is carbon nanotubes, where you could take DNA or genes, which are floppy, and you wrap them around a carbon nanotube, which is like a molecule or an atom in size, and slide it into a cell, into a precise location. And it's happening right now all around us. That's what's going on. This one's exciting. This is from Mexico, where they found corn that actually fixes its own nitrogen. They've isolated that, they're isolating those traits in that corn, in the mucus, and actually seeing if they could transmit or put that trait inside of crops like wheat or corn or barley or canola, allowing those crops to fix their own nitrogen so you didn't have to use so much nitrogen fertilizer to grow the crop. Urban farming is a rising trend. I always find it funny when how activists label the farmers that are out here in Alberta as factory farmers, when in fact it's indoor farms that are factory farms. It's all controlled by HVAC, and everybody thinks indoor vertical farming is wonderful, and I'm not saying it isn't, but don't label us out there in the field as factory farms when this in fact is, man. Climate change, agriculture is being vilified. How do we tell the whole story of agriculture? Mother Nature is not always motherly. We have hail that ravages crops that are out there. We have drought that hits us. We have floods. We have diseases that hammer our crops. We have insects that come in and just eat the crop after you've planted it. And right now, our farmers are struggling because the crop is under snow. And all of these things are stuff we deal with on a daily basis in agriculture. And sometimes it feels like Mother Nature just isn't on your side, you know? Yeah. Now let's talk about greenhouse gas. In Canada, these are Canadian statistics, we emit through agriculture about 60 million metric tons of carbon dioxide equivalents from agriculture, which includes enteric fermentation, yes, cow burps, and from manure and from soil, because soil releases some greenhouse gases. Everybody will acknowledge that we sequester carbon in the soil. So when we grow crops, we pull carbon dioxide through photosynthesis out of the air, and so we sequester that carbon in the soil, about 11 million metric tons. But nobody ever talks about the 79 million metric tons of carbon that we grow and pull into our crops and send out all around the world. How come that's not being taken into account? In any study you listen to about Canadian agriculture and greenhouse gas balance, they never talk about the carbon that is in the crop, ever. We're 30 million metric tons to the good. If you take that simple equation, I didn't make this up. This is all references right from the Canadian archives. So this is Canadian data, right? Now, livestock emits all of this. It's worse than transportation. No, it's not. The IPCC came out and said that direct emissions from livestock globally are 5% and transportation is 14%. Then they did whole cycle studies on livestock and determined whole cycle, including growing the crop and dealing with the manure and dealing with all that stuff, was 14.5, but they never did a whole study cycle on agriculture. So guess what the media does? 14.5% from livestock and 14% from transportation. Therefore, transportation is less greenhouse gas emitting than livestock is, but it's apples and oranges, and nobody reported that. Even the IPC said our first report was incorrect, but they never corrected it. Nobody corrects this stuff. It's amazing. Now, meat or not to meat? Well, we live in Alberta. We have a whole bunch of land out there, about 2/3 of our agricultural land, that will never grow a crop. So I'm very happy to be involved in the cattle industry because we take that cellulose and hemicellulose and make it into a wonderful product. Now, if you want to eat Impossible Burgers or Beyond Meat, feel free. We also grow peas and lentils in Western Canada. Happy to be able to do that. And interestingly enough, right now, we have this new label on there. That new label there is a bioengineered label. It's the first food that's come out because you see the heme in Impossible Burgers comes from genetically modified soybeans. So therefore, you're eating a plant-based genetically engineered burger that's not from cows. So it's quite confusing to people because they're messing with their religion. As we think about 3D printed foods, I often think about what are the substrates that are going to be inside 3D printers. Little Johnny comes home and says, Mom, I want a pizza. Make your own damn pizza. So he puts it in there and he prints out a pizza. What's the food ink? What are the substrates in those 3D food printers? Where does it come from? I have to give high marks to, corn, wheat, canola, I think anyway. And food attributes, I don't think farmers and consumers are aligned. Farmers are interested in yield and germination and standability. Consumers are interested in taste and nutrition. And I think we have to align these people together more. And we need to do that. The ANDI rating, I'm not a big fan of Whole Foods, but this is good. The Aggregate Nutrient Density Index rating, which looks at the nutrient density inside of foods. I think that's a good place to go or in the right direction. But what's really going to make food interesting is nutrigenomics, where you take your genome, which I shared with you mine, and you match the genome to the foods that are important for your body. In other words, functional foods match to your body are different because of our bodies are being different. And we're going to see this in a whole brand new science called nutrigenomics. So how do we feed the future? From a farming perspective, this is a diagram I drew out when I was overnight in the Detroit airport because I missed my flight. And on the far left, you have soil. On the far right, you have beef, soup, or beer. Pretend this is barley. These are all the chevrons represent all of the disconnected pieces in agriculture today. On the bottom, you have 3 purple, gold, and green lines. The purple line really is data that farmers need to manage their farming operation. The gold really refers to the traceability or the trust index that you as consumers want information on. And ultimately, it's the green line that matters, which is the long-term sustainability index. So I don't give a crap if it's an organic farmer or it's a conventional farmer or what kind of farmer, but let's get a sustainability index so you as a consumer can determine what the sustainability of this free-range, wild-raised chicken is versus another kind of chicken. Don't you think that infinite sustainability matters? Isn't that important alongside of nutrition and profitability and price of food? So precision agriculture, the stuff I'm dealing with, deals with sensors, robots, and data, satellite imagery, grid testing, wireless sensors on farm, electronic records for management, traceability, sustainability. And this part of agriculture is exploding right now because there's more and more ability to get information. People like Olds College, I'm involved with the Smart Farm, we are desperate in agriculture for something called systems integrators. Young people who can go onto a farm and pull this data and pull these systems together. We are desperate for systems integrators on the farm today. Desperate for them and need them very, very badly. Agriculture technology, and people don't think about agriculture as being technologically advanced, will profoundly shape agriculture. Remote satellites, sensing with Macro satellites, microsatellites, aerial imagery, drone technology, all of that is happening all around us. The ability to figure out what the root diseases are in a crop from space are astronomically interesting using hypospectral technology, chlorophyll content, chlorophyll index, water content. Earmuffs for potatoes. No, these aren't Canadian earmuffs for tomatoes. They are showing you the growth rate of the mitosis of the tomatoes and matching the nitrogen and water according to the sensors. So we are working with soil sensors in the field right now, weather sensors, pest sensors, nitrogen sensors. All of these things are coming together. All this information is coming to farmers. And it's generating a lot of stuff. Soil sensing data. You don't think farmers know what's in their soil? This is a handful of soil sensors that are available right now to farmers. Everything from gamma ray sensors, yes, we use gamma rays to sense what's in the soil, to all sorts of devices such as electrical connectivity devices. Algorithms. I just left Stream Technology on 23rd Avenue. John Murphy and the team at Stream are developing what's called a convolutional neural net, or the ability for you to take your camera on your phone and snap it and train that phone using their neural net. You can build your own algorithms using their system. It's amazing. And he who has the best algorithm will win, because eventually you'll be passing over this crop and you'll be seeing things, and the person who has the best algorithm will help the farmer make more money. So how does this all converge in the field? Well, hang on, I'll set this up. This is one of our farmers, this is Terry Aberhart. I'm not going to play the whole video. What you're going to see here, again, counter to what you believe, that farmers douse their products with pesticides. This is variable rate fungicide technology. So a satellite image was taken. We calculated it out, the biovegetative index of the field, programmed that into the sprayer. So we change the amount of fungicide that goes on the crop depending on how big the crop is or how intense the vegetation is.
Okay, so here we are doing some variable rate fungicide off of a prescription that we generated off of a real shot photo taken about a week ago in this field, or just prior to flowering. We're spraying Proline here, and what we did is we looked at where the heavier parts of the field were in the lighter areas of the field, and we're putting a full rate on the heaviest parts of the field for sclerotinia control, an 80% rate in the lighter areas. In the very light areas we're putting on a 0 rate, or just shutting the booms off. So you can see on the map here on the screen, the blue lines are where we've already applied the.
So it gives you an idea of what's going on inside of a cab of a sprayer. And it integrates all these technologies together, something that you wouldn't think about. Robotics is hitting the farm. Robotics are suitable for the 3Ds: dangerous, dull, and dirty work. And RBC projects that in the next 10 years, there'll be 123,000 job vacancies at farm level. Let me repeat that, 123,000 job vacancies, mostly for operators, because you can't find anybody to operate farm equipment, especially stuff that is north of $750,000. So what are we going to do? It's going to cost the Canadian economy $11 billion if we don't fill these jobs. $11 billion. You can't get people to move out to Irricana, or you can't get people to move out to Acadia Valley. How are farmers going to address this issue? They're going to use robotics. So autonomous farming is going to come. It's not if, it's just when. So the issues are labor, capital costs of equipment, operating costs, and soil compaction. So I'm CEO of a company called DOT. This is DOT, named after the owner's or the inventor's mother, Dorothy. So that's why it's called DOT. DOT is a 100% autonomous U-shaped platform. It doesn't have a cab. It doesn't have a hitch pin. 173 horsepower diesel engine, and DOT connects or cradles a variety of farm equipment. What you're seeing here right now is a 300 bushel, 30-foot seeder, 100% autonomously operated, or 120-foot state-of-the-art sprayer. And it takes the farmer out of the cab and allows the farmer to actually interact with his family or his land. And it connects the farmer in a different way. DOT is versatile. You can go to a grain cart, you can go to a corn planter, you can go to a land roller, you can put multiple dots in the field. It's all operated with GPS and GIS down to sub-inch accuracy, and is capable of doing all of the variable rate technology that I shared with you earlier. It's capable of doing multiple dots in the field at the same time, and you see it there working within the previous passes down to sub-inch accuracy. This is farming today. This is what we're doing on the farm. This is what we're doing. DOT has eyes. So we've got photometric, we've got LiDAR. Everything that you would see inside your Tesla cars is inside our robot, our radar. We've got Moji here. Moj Taba is with the Alberta Machinery Institute. We've just moved him here. He's with DOT. We've got him and Ali here, and they're working on artificial intelligence and machine learning at the Alberta Machinery Intelligence Institute to program DOT to do what it needs to do. That's the level that we're at. That's what we're working on. So we're excited to be able to establish that relationship with Amy in Edmonton here. And technology will reshape crops. If I ask you to imagine an apple tree, you would think it's this. But if you're using robotics, you may want an apple tree to be shaped like that, because it would be easier to pick the apples if it was shaped like that. And if you could go along and find out where all the blossoms of the apples were coming on the apple tree and knock off all of the blossoms except the 20 apples that you want in the right spot, the apples would develop exactly the same spot on the tree every time. And when you had the pickers go along, they could automatically and robotically pick the apples. This is what's going on. This is vision. This is photometric technology, augmented reality with wearables, connecting the farm, the complete farm, with an internet Wi-Fi mesh, like my farm is connected, my acreage is connected with a Wi-Fi mesh, so I can hook up all of these sensors without SIM cards. I just hook them up to IP addresses. Data, soil data, sensor data, scales, weather, moisture data, farm record data, automatic data from equipment guidance data, market price data, grain bin storage, inventory management, CRM, people management, spectral data, all kinds of data. It is big data, machine data, and this is the data that we're dealing with today on the farm. It's not your grandpa's farm, right? So what will the future bring? Machine learning, artificial intelligence or augmented intelligence, data management and algorithms. So a couple of years ago, I had a chance to spend some time with Bill Gates, presented him with the data system that we had built back in the Agri-Trend and Agri-Data times, and he said, well, it's fine, but it doesn't really solve the problem for farmers in India and so on and so forth. And then Peter Diamandis challenges us to do a moonshot. So we developed something just recently called AGvisorPRO. I want to show it to you. It's a moonshot. It's about providing instantaneous connectivity or Uberizing knowledge and wisdom, connecting farmers to experts anywhere on the planet in real time.
Hi, I'm Rob Saik, and I'm the founder of a brand new business concept for agriculture called AGvisorPRO Answers Now, and I'd like you to meet Patrick Walter, Chief Operating Officer and General Manager. Patrick, how does AGvisorPRO work? What is it about?
You as a farmer, you run into so many different issues on a daily basis. You know, you go into your tractor software, all of a sudden doesn't work anymore, or you go into your fields, there's a disease you don't know about, etc. Or you just want to talk to someone about mental health, right?
Yep.
So what you do is you go onto our application, you plug in what your problem is, and we instantaneously match you with some of the best farming expertise that North America has to offer and beyond.
Right, so as a farmer, you'd put in your profile, the type of equipment you run, the livestock you have, the crops you grow, and on the other side, we have industry experts, government experts, and independent experts, and we really do three things with AGvisorPRO. The first thing we do is we match up your question with an advisor that can solve the problem. The second thing we do is provide instantaneous connectivity. First of all, we default to audio, then there's video, you can share a picture inside, and lastly, we provide the transaction so you can connect with these experts. It's really a fluid system and really, really exciting.
Yeah, I think you guys would be really keen to see what we've created. Come on our webpage, AGvisorPRO Answers Now.
So yes, I did a commercial, but I did it on purpose because I wanted you to see the evolution of technology in the farm and how we're dealing with some of the disparity in terms of the lack of practical agricultural understanding today, which is getting a bigger problem, and how we're going to connect people to expertise. So the holy grail is we need farm management data to provide augmented intelligence to farmers. We need to have proof of production, because you guys all want to know how the crop was grown, and next week you're going to ask for something different, because that's the way consumers are. But you need confidence in how the food was grown, so fair dinkum. We'll go with that. And sustainability, an index that rewards farmers for long-term sustainability practice. What are those? Well, soil, water, greenhouse gas balance, animal welfare, and the most important one is economic viability. Because if farmers aren't economically viable, there is no sustainability. And when it comes to sustainability and you hear people beaking off on social media, how many businesses do you know that are over 100 years old? That would be quite an accomplishment, wouldn't it? Yet I know many farming operations, many, that are called century farms. That means they've been farming in that family, and it's been passed down generation to generation for over 100 years. It drives me crazy when I watch anti-science, anti-modern agricultural activists preach sustainability on social media to these century farmers. When they have a business that has been sustainable for 100 years or more, then they will have earned the right to preach. In the meantime, maybe an alternative would be to shut up and talk to some farmers about sustainability. They're pretty good at it. I'm concerned that if you were to put GMO, fertilizers, pesticides, and even robotics to a yes or no vote, all would be banned. People would be voting out of ignorance and fear. The vote would affect every farmer who works to raise food that we need to sustain the planet. Next time you're out for dinner and the conversation turns to food religion, I hope you're able to put up your hands and say, or ask, maybe a better issue to discuss is how do we make agriculture infinitely sustainable? The book is Food 5.0. I am just a little bit over it, not much. And I'd be happy to take some questions from you. We got till 8 o'clock. And Q&A is always the best part of this whole thing. So I've done a lot of these, University of Saskatchewan, University of McGill. So I know that what I presented to you tonight, for many of you, is counter to what you believe. I know that. The book, Food 5.0, runs 180 degrees in the face of most of the food books at Chapters. I know that. I have nothing to sell you. I have nothing to sell in the book. I don't work for Monsanto. I work in robotics. I gave you the truth. If you don't believe me, call a farmer or do your own research work. But do it from qualified sources, because natural news is not a qualified source. Thank you very much for letting me share this with you. Thank you. So I think Yvette has got a purple microphone that she tosses around to somebody who's got a question. So let's try to not make the comments too long, get to questions, because people tend with a microphone to want to. Whoa, good catch. Oh, right here.
Thanks. I didn't hear you talk about biodiversity, so I'm interested in knowing what you have to say about monocropping and the effects on the ecosystems.
Okay, when it comes to biodiversity, fair question. I think one of the things that we need to respect is that farmers grow crops because it makes them money. And there's a reason that corn and soybean is grown in Iowa, because they do it really, really good. I like to see crop rotation. Many of the farmers I work with have 7 crops of the rotation. I think that makes some sense. Now, in terms of biodiversity, farmers don't get paid to grow a whole bunch of weeds and stuff. However, I think there is a red box and a green box when it comes to farming and support for farmers. Green box support would be that perhaps along areas where we're not growing crops, we could seed. And this has been conversations we've had. Could we seed wild flowers or wild vegetation? And I'll challenge you people in the city with lawns, because monarch butterflies really need to have milkweed. They love milkweed. Milkweed is one of the most noxious weeds on a farming operation. We hate milkweed. But you in cities could have milkweed everywhere and your butterflies could float through the cities. So biodiversity, fair enough. But it needs to be shared amongst the population, city and country. Farmers don't get paid to grow biodiverse crops. They get paid to grow corn, soybeans, wheat, barley, and there's a reason for it. It's because it's the only way they can make a profit. There is a new agriculture that they're playing with, which is called intercropping. So you would have a crop of wheat, and inside that crop of wheat, you might grow flax or peas would be a good combination. So people are playing with that. But you could imagine wheat and peas grown in the same field, that they don't mature at the same time. And so you got a maturation issue. And when you're harvesting it, then you've got peas and wheat in your combine hopper, which means that then you need to clean them differently. And it has all sorts of problems. Now, there are people playing with it. It may come that has a role. Another thing that's going on is a practice called cover crops, which would get back to your idea, where you could take off the crop and you could seed a cover crop after the crop was harvested, so you could grow a different crop, like create some diversity. The problem is it's October 10th, and our crops are underneath 8 inches of snow. And by the time we get them off, Lord willing, it'll be November, and there is no time to grow a cover crop. So a lot of the stuff you read in the media about these things works fine in places like maybe Kentucky or maybe North Carolina, but that dog don't hunt in Western Canada. And we've got 90 million acres up here that people are trying to force their ideas on, but the ideas don't work because we're different up here. You have to understand that. So you got to be careful about what you're reading and understand the practical implications of it. Okay, so I know I danced around quite a bit, but that's kind of where we're at. Next question.
For most of the talk, I'm just curious as to why you frame most of the talk in terms of increasing productivity, feeding the 10 billion by increasing productivity, when we already produce enough feed to feed 1.5 times the world population. And it seems to me to make more sense to frame it in terms of access to safe, nutritious, sufficient food, because that raises questions of distribution, structural inequality, waste, and things like that, especially because productivity and the kinds of agriculture that you're promoting can have potentially be harder to access and require more investment for smallholder farmers in the world, the places in the world where food is needed the most.
I agree with you. So the answer to global food security doesn't come from Canada or Argentina or Australia necessarily growing more food. We have to because we can, and we do provide tremendous buffer. It's like saying, well, I'm just going to go and have all of my power for my house from solar and wind. It's all fine until there is no solar or any wind, and then you're depending on a secondary source. Same thing with food. There has to be a secondary backup. Your point about food distribution, and I would really frame it in terms of food loss, is a real problem. In places like Uganda, Nigeria, correct me if I'm wrong, Stan, we get up to 50% of the food is lost after harvest. In Western Canada, our losses are primarily before harvest. What's going on today, that food quality is going down because of what we're facing before harvest. But around the world, the food losses are primarily after harvest. And this is not easily solved. If you have mycotoxin, aflatoxin inside of your maize crop in your holding area in a small Ugandan farm, you lose that crop. So the only way that you can ensure that you have food security is to stop aflatoxin and mycotoxin from getting into the crop. Well, how would you do that? Well, fungicides would be the #1 way. How else would you do it? Or perhaps maybe genetically engineering the crop to be resistant to the fungus that creates aflatoxin and mycotoxin. But there's a problem, because wealthy North Americans and wealthy Europeans say to the African nations, you're not allowed to use genetic engineering because it's bad. So you put these people in a situation, and I can rattle off plenty of examples right now. Brown streak mosaic and cassava. Cassava is a root and a staple crop, and there is no cure for brown streak mosaic. You can't spray it out. There's nothing you can do. There is a genetically engineered solution in Kenya and Uganda. They're not allowed to use it. Bananas right now, matoke. Matoke is attacked with bacterial wilt and black sigatoga. There is no cure, yet there is. It's a genetically engineered cure. It sits behind the research walls in Uganda and in Kenya, but it's not available to the people. From a nutritional standpoint, because you touched on that, I think there's all sorts of opportunity to breed rice that's higher, for example, in iron. The top nutritional problems in the world are iron, zinc deficiency, iodine deficiency. We could have crops that are higher in those, but we don't. We could, but we don't. So as we are staring into a world population of 2050, whatever that number would be, the idea is that we need Nigeria to feed itself. There's 180 million, soon to be 200 million people in Nigeria, 70% agrarian. Most of them are the poorest people on the planet. We need Nigeria to feed itself, not to export. I get you. And then we need to stop the crop from spoiling. And this is a big, wicked problem. It's not just simply saying, well, we'll just stop it from spoiling. It's a big issue. Next question.
Yeah, I was raised on a farm in southern Alberta, so I know a lot about what you're talking about. However, now we live in Lougheed County, and my wife and I'm a frequent Netflix watcher, especially the documentaries.
Yeah.
So I've seen a lot about factory farms. I know you don't like that term.
No.
And maybe you could talk a bit about steroid use and infection control in animals and in pigs, especially, like the green swamps, the pink swamps down in North and South Carolina that are killing people because they're spraying that stuff on the land. And also, antibiotic use in chicken farms, pig farms, cattle farms, all gets into the milk and other produce that we eat. So
Okay,
I'm concerned about that.
Sure. And
by the way, I'm now a pescatarian.
And I know what that is, too. So there are a lot of things brought all together. First of all, farmers don't make money if their animals are sick. And it's cruel to not treat an animal that's sick. Now, we had some practices that were called prophylactic antibiotics, fair enough, where you basically fed antibiotics to the population of the herd or the flock in an effort to try to keep the disease down because you couldn't afford it. Today, they're moving away from that into treating parts of the flock or the animals that are sick or isolated and treated with antibiotics. Now, I want to just say for the record that we hear all of this about no non-hormone pork, non-hormone chicken, non-hormone beef. They're non-hormone pork and chicken. There is no such thing as hormones used in pork and chicken production. Anytime you see that label on there, it's been illegal for about 50 years. We have hormonal implants in cattle, but by the time you harvest the animal, those hormones tend to be gone, and you're not allowed to ship any animal for harvest if the animal still has antibiotics in that animal. That's the law. Now, whether or not there's people working outside of that or not, I can't comment. But the law is you can't sell an animal for harvest while it has antibiotics left in the animal. Those things are metabolized over time. That's the law. There are no hormones used in chicken and pork production. That's the law. There are some hormones used in production of milk in the United States called BST, and BST is a natural hormone inside the cow, but it's rarely used. So a lot of the stuff that we hear about is an anomaly rather than practice. So, and on Netflix specifically, I challenge you to go to Netflix and find a positive movie about agriculture. There is a documentary. Do you have one? Oh, you got a question. So I'm just trying to remember of it. There's one positive one that just came on, tried to get on Netflix, and Netflix says no to it. It was produced by Kennedy. Help me. I showed it in, anyway, it'll come to me. Was that? Food Evolution. Yeah, Food Evolution. It's not on Netflix. Why is Food Evolution not on Netflix? It's been shown all over the world. Why is it not on Netflix? Why is everything on Netflix anti-agriculture? Find a positive show about agriculture on Netflix. Find one. Let me know. I'd be dying to watch it because you can't find it. It's not there. It doesn't exist. Okay, next question. Lots of questions. Cool. Where are we going to go next? Oh, I got to pick. Oh, I'll pick this gentleman here. And then this lady here. Yeah. Sorry.
Yeah, to meet the challenge of feeding 10 billion people, I think one of the ways is to increase productivity, which is not one of the three alternatives that was listed. Now, instead of having outdoor farming, subjecting ourselves to climate and everything, can we not have farming indoor and 24-hour situation like do it industrially?
You absolutely can. And I think we're going to see a proliferation of indoor farms, and I would absolutely welcome it. But it primarily makes sense for water-containing vegetables, high water-containing produce. So you're growing the produce like tomatoes, cucumbers, spinach, lettuce, and you're growing those high water-containing vegetables and fruits, maybe even, close to the point of consumption, so you're reducing transportation and increasing freshness. Totally agree with you, totally agree. However, it will not replace corn, soybeans, canola, wheat, barley, because you can't grow those crops inside and be profitable. Very few of the indoor farms today have made money, very few, except maybe cannabis. Okay.
Actually, that was going to be part of my question, but I'm going to ask you a bigger vision question. Agriculture. It's not a dirty word.
No.
We all have to eat.
Yep.
So how do you see the future? I'll give you an example of how legislation sometimes directs how farmers will proceed. The Canada Food Guide changes. So do you see, with the technology you've talked about and the applications that you know are in the works, how long, and I know that there's farmers in the room here, how long before we get the next gen interested in looking at robotics, automation, and they might even ask you, saying, could we also grow organic crops in a new way using robotics? And you showed the row by row farming because they were GMO and they would stay straight and soldierly so the machines can get by. Those are questions that I think that will arise from the next gen when they look at potential of farming, like, is there really a career in it? How fast and far will it go with the technology? And I know you talked about farm integrators, but they need more substantive answers than that, because when they're going through post-secondary, they're saying, is this the right course? Is this the right pathway? Or will it be outdated by the time I look for a job?
Okay, great, thank you. There are 4 jobs waiting for every agricultural grad right now. So that's the first answer to your question. 4 jobs waiting for every ag grad right now. Absolutely a career path. Let's just talk about a couple of things you said. Robotics and organics. I believe all farmers would like to be organic farmers. I believe all farmers would like to reduce the amount of fertilizer and pesticide they use. It doesn't make any sense. When your inputs are $250 or $3,000 an acre for potatoes, it doesn't make any sense that we would want to use more of those. It doesn't make any sense. So I believe that all farmers would like to grow more organically because it would mean less dollars out of their pocketbook for fertilizer and pesticides. Agreed? Okay, good. Everybody's nodding. Who could argue with that? So the only technology that I know of right now, well, robotics, actually we could run a robot down and we could actually weed out around the plants. We could robotically weed out around the plants. But it is soil disturbance, and it degrades the soil, so it's not exactly perfect, but it is a dramatic reduction. So that'll help. And we've had people come to us from the organic farming industry and say, can you equip DOT to do organic practices like cleaning up? A lot of it around tillage. So if you have rows of crop, can you till the weeds out in between and kill the weeds? Well, again, it's tillage. But the only science that would allow us to farm more organically is genetic engineering. Because genetic engineering is the only science that I know of that we could breed a crop to fix its own nitrogen. We could breed a crop to pull out more phosphorus out of the soil. We could breed a crop that would fight its own insects. We could breed a crop that would fight its own disease. So genetic engineering, biotechnology, is the only science that I know of that would allow us to farm more, not less, organically. And paradoxically, the organic industry has said no to genetic engineering. When the whole philosophy of organic farming is to use less pesticide and less fertilizer, which is exactly what I showed you we're doing with biotechnology. It's not more, it's less, especially on an active ingredient or toxicology per acre basis. So the future of agriculture, I think, is GMO, genetically modified organic farming. But we've painted ourselves into these polarized discussions where we can't come together. And it's nonsense. Because when we think as human beings about what would be best for the planet, and you think about infinite sustainability around soil and soil health and water utilization and greenhouse balance, those are the things that we should be putting in the center of the discussion, not religiosity. Okay, next question. There's somebody up there. That gentleman in the green, he's had his hand up, and then the gentleman over here. Yeah, okay.
I wanted to ask you about, so you're talking about the profit of the crops for the farmers, but what about if there is a new innovation like in vitro meat, and for cattle in Alberta, for example, will hurt a lot of farmers that they might have to go out of business. So what will happen with them? And what do you think about in vitro meat? Like, is actually feasible to feed the population that want to continue eat meat with in vitro meat?
So you're asking the question, do you think it's feasible to feed the population with like...
in vitro meat, but the ones that want to continue eating meat, that meat protein from animals.
Okay, so the question is there a future for livestock production for human consumption? Absolutely there is. Again, I'll restate this. You travel in Alberta, in our wonderful province of Alberta, 2/3 of the land that is being accessed for agriculture is not suitable for growing crops. So what are we supposed to do? Just kill all the cows, have no more burgers, and let that land just sit idle and do nothing? Is that?
The question was more about in vitro meat, so thinking about animal welfare issues.
Oh! I missed that in vitro word. Okay, so in vitro meat, thanks, Stan. So in vitro meat is interesting, is that you're growing animal protein, but you're not raising livestock. You're actually doing it in a dish or in a lab. And absolutely, I think that will have a future, and it'll have an impact on some of the meat. Now, the question is, a lot of vegans are against animal agriculture because it's cruel to the animals. So the question would be, will a vegan eat a steak if it has nothing to do with a cow? This steak was grown in a lab. It has nothing to do with the cow, no cruelty to any animals, blah, blah, blah. So would you eat it? Well, I don't know. So what's the reason that you didn't like it in the first place? So the answer is yes. Short answer, yes. I do believe there's a future in that. How big will it get? Like, you know, in the book I talk about something, so I'll just paint this. Like, we don't know where the future is going to go. But here's something. Right now, we take the sun's energy, okay? The sun energy, it comes down and hits the earth, right? We take this inert nitrogen that I breathe, inert nitrogen, right? Inert nitrogen. and I fix it through the Haber-Bosch process, I fix it into fertilizer. And I put that fertilizer on the land, okay? Put that nitrogen fertilizer on the land and put a seed in the ground. And that seed grows, utilizes the nitrogen fertilizer, combines it with the sunlight's energy, with carbon dioxide. There's not a poisonous gas, by the way, carbon dioxide, and that produces photosynthase. And the photosynthase include things like protein in the plant, so I can eat it and I can get protein. Right, you follow me on the cycle? This is the cycle, okay? Now what if, to your point, what if we just eliminated all of that and just took quantum computing and pulled the nitrogen out of the air and made it into protein without any agriculture at all? What then? It's interesting. So there's a guy named Chad Rigetti of Rigetti Computing, his quantum computing company. He's a farm kid from Moose Jaw, Saskatchewan. Chad was at Abundance 360, and when he was talking about quantum computing, he had the Haber-Bosch process in crops on the screen. I went up to him after and I said, why did you use that example? He said, I'm intrigued to see if we can't just take nitrogen out of the air and turn it into protein for human consumption. What would that do for agriculture? Never mind livestock, just everything, right? So, anyways, there's this gentleman right here.
I have like a two-part question. And from your presentation, it sounded like you're still training your neural net. So I was wondering, how far do you think, in your opinion, DOT is from implementation? And second part to that question is, you also mentioned, as you know, like farmers are working with like pretty thin margins. So how affordable is your technology going to be? And the third part would be, would you open source your technology for innovation so others can just push it forward?
All right, so first of all, the third question is you talk to him right there. So, okay. So that's the third. So the first question was about the training. So right now, DOT we can put boundary maps around a field. We can do obstacles and even gullies. We call them school zones. And we can do path planning, and DOT will run back and forth up and down the field. It can't break the boundaries, and it runs. But if DOT encounters, the other day on social media, I saw a moose carcass in the field. So you're harvesting your canola, and all of a sudden you come across a dead moose. Well, it wasn't there in the springtime. And all of a sudden, if DOT's coming along, it's going to see a dead moose, and it's going to stop. Moji's job, Ali's job, is to figure out, hey, first of all, DOT says, I see something. Oh, it's a dead moose. How do I get around it, and how do I replan my path? That's his job. That's what he's going to be doing. So the answer to your question is absolutely, and it's a big, wicked problem. We have to solve it. We will. And when you think about it, we have to have LiDAR and radar potentially to look in the soil to see if the soil's wet so DOT won't get there and get stuck. That's what radar would do for us. We have to make sure that DOT would stop if a human being or a pet goes in front of DOT. It has to stop. It's a big machine, right? It has to stop. Second part of your question was cost. Okay, so that 120-foot, 1,600-gallon self-propelled sprayer today is $675,000, give or take, okay? You might need two of them, I don't know, but $675,000 to $1 million. No, $675,000. So that's a 120-foot, 1,600-gallon self-propelled sprayer. A DOT with a 120-foot boom is $535,000. So it's much cheaper, there's no driver, and it's got all of the bells and whistles. Plus, that sprayer, when fully loaded with 1,600 gallons in a self-propelled sprayer, weighs 54,000 pounds. DOT, same capacity, same tank, weighs 34,000 pounds. So we're 20,000 pounds lighter. That sprayer burns, I don't know, call it 15 to 20 gallons of fuel an hour. DOT, about 5 gallons of fuel an hour. Sprays the same width, right? So these are the metrics. I love where you've gone with this. These are the metrics that we have to work because this drives down to economics for farmers. So if a farmer has 2 or 3 DOTs working, it means 2 or 3 people are not in the tractor, and he can manage 2 or 3, which creates opportunity for young people to come in and they're excited. Could you imagine taking a dog and locking a dog in a glass cage for 13 hours a day, where the dog has nothing to do but sit there and watch some monitors. You'd be called up for cruelty to animals. And yet we take our brightest people and put them in tractor cabs for 13 hours a day. They don't even steer because it's all auto steer. And they sit there and they monitor what's going on and refill. And they're on Twitter and they're bored senseless. Is this any way to attract people into this dynamic industry? I don't think so. So, we got one more question, or we wrap it up? Okay, thank you everybody. Thanks a lot.
He runs his own show, clearly. So thank you all very much for coming. Enjoy the book. Thank you so much, Robert, for bringing this incredibly provocative and stimulating conversation. I really appreciate it very much. Thanks. Good night.